What's up, everybody? Matt Kajeski here, back again with the Stokastic channel. And today we're talking college football DFS Week 5, the Friday main slate. We've got 5 games to get into. We'll discuss everything you need to know. But before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We're also brought to you today by Prize Picks. And if you've never heard of Prize Picks, they offer daily prop-based contests where you make lineups up to 5 players and you're picking over/under on their player props. You can make up to 10 extra entry fees on these props. There's no sharks, no optimizers, no mass entries. If you click the link in the video description below, you are going to get 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum and up to a $100 match deposit bonus when you sign up and make your first deposit with Prize Picks. Make sure to check them out. All right, we'll bring you behind the glass, 5 games to get into. These are our data usage tools. Up at the top, you're going to see a lot of team statistics, your Vegas odds, defensive metrics allowed, pass yards per attempt, rush yards per attempt. I won't get into all that, but if you have questions, leave a comment, or you can reach out to me on Twitter at Matt_Kajeski. First game we've got here, Tulane taking on Houston, 2.5-point spread in favor of Houston. This game is a 55-point total overall. Excuse me. For Tulane, they're led by Michael Pratt. They have a new offensive coordinator this year, and he's been very efficient with Pratt. This team is playing relatively slow, but they have a 39.7% pass rate. However, Pratt's involved in the run game. He has designed rush attempts of 5, 2, 6, and 5 in their 4 games, at least 5 in 3 of the 4. That's important because it gives him a good floor, and he does have 197 cumulative rushing yards. That's about 50 yards per game on the ground. As a passer, he's averaging 226 on just 24 attempts per game. We've seen that spike in competitive matchups, and Houston certainly is a little bit lacking on defense to start the year. They've been in a couple shootouts, and if they can give up points to teams like UTSA through the air, Tulane can capitalize as well. In the run game, Tyjae Spears, he's been in a sort of 1A, 1B situation with Iverson Celestine to start the year, but last week, this shifted quite a bit. 28 touches for Tyjae Spears, including 6 targets in the pass game, 22 carries in the ground. If he has the upside to see 28 touches in an individual game and in a competitive one, we need to have him on our radar. So he's somebody at 5,300 on DraftKings we need to be keeping our eye on. Iverson Celestine, he was previously involved, but only 6 touches for him in the last game. He's averaging 9.3 per game. There's just a little worry that maybe he's not as involved moving forward if Spears takes on a larger workload. But for tournaments, 3,200, that's serviceable. In the pass game, it's essentially like a 5-man rotation. Lawrence Keys did not play in their last game, so watch his status. Pre-game, he would be involved in this, but if Lawrence Keys misses, Deuce Watts led the team with a 68% route share. He only has 8 targets this year, but Watts has been relatively involved to start. He ran the most routes, so he's your buy low type candidate, but he's also middling in price. You can find cheaper guys attached to this offense like DeJuan McDougal, Shea Wyatt, Jaquan Jackson. All of them participated in 63.5% of the routes, and all of them have more targets than Watts to start the year. It's still very condensed. None of them have more than 17. None of them have fewer than 10. So we're really looking at, I think, just playing the cheapest of the bunch, which McDougal and Wyatt are the stone min. That's McDougal, and Wyatt's at 3,900. These are my 2 favorite here for Tulane, but Keys he's viable if he plays. Same with Jaquan Jackson and Deuce Watts. Even tight end Tyrick James could be a GPP option. For Houston, they're more condensed and they're favored in this game. The offense is running through Clayton Tune. He has 135 rush yards, which is pretty solid for him, averaging 247 through the air on 32 attempts. Not the best, but it's fine. Like, he's a serviceable quarterback, and he's in an offense that has been explosive. It's just left a little bit to be desired this year. I had higher expectations personally from Houston. I know a lot of you did as well. But Tune at 6,200, he's still playable on this slate. Just like for reference, compared to Pratt, he's a little bit cheaper on a team with a higher team total. In the backfield, they're getting back Brandon Campbell. He was previously the 1A to Zon Henry's 1B in the offense, but neither of them have played full games with their counterpart healthy. In the first couple weeks, Tazon Henry was dealing with a sprained ankle, so Brandon Campbell dominated work. Then in their second most recent game, Campbell gets injured and Tazon Henry pops up for double-digit touches twice. This has the danger of being a 50-50 committee, but Campbell was previously given the reins to the backfield ahead of Henry, so I would project this 60-40 in favor of Campbell. Plus, Tazon Henry is like 175 pounds, so it's really hard for him to get a major workload to begin with. But all this to say, it should be a timeshare skewed slightly towards Campbell. In the receiver room, this is far more easy to project. Nathaniel Dell's a straight alpha, averaging 8.5 targets per game, 95.3 yards. The target share I wish was a little bit higher, but 29% still pretty good. In competitive games, he's going to be very, very strong. So Dell is number 1. Matthew Golden's number 2, but they've rotated receivers behind Dell. You'll see some Golden, you'll see some Joseph Manjack, and you'll see Keyshawn Carter. These guys have ping-ponged around between like 50 to 70% of the routes. Golden would be my favorite, but he's still a bit expensive. You could be viable punting with Manjack. Carter, I would rather just play Golden. And then tight end Christian Trahan, he's kind of in this mix as well. Hasn't been targeted in the last 2 games, which is a big concern for him. Honestly, I'm just trying to get up to Dell, I think, for Houston. And then I'll probably leave the rest of the ancillary receivers alone outside of just stacks of the game. UTSA takes on Middle Tennessee State, 62.5 total. This game is awesome. 4-point spread in favor of UTSA. They're fast. They're pass heavy this year, largely out of necessity, but it makes sense. The concern here with UTSA is they played a lot of tough games. They've already played Army. They've played the aforementioned Houston. They've played Texas, and they've received a ton of injuries on their O-line. Middle Tennessee State is an excellent pass rush. They're averaging 5 sacks per game against FBS opponents. That's a big mismatch, but Frank Harris has been able to handle it. At this rate, he may get hurt if he continues to take hits, but he's mobile and he's been able to evade pressure. You can see that in the 162 cumulative rushing yards. He's also averaging 329 through the air on 39.5 attempts. They played 2 overtime games, so this is certainly elevated. Still, Harris is awesome, and he's mobile, and he's cheap on this slate. You can play him confidently. You can also stack him confidently. They're using 3 pass catchers, and that's it. Zachary Franklin, DeCorian Clark, and Joshua Cephas, they're all between 6,500 and 7,500. They're all averaging right around 100 yards per game. Franklin's at 97.8. Clark's at 107.8. Cephas is at 101. Targets, basically all double digits for these guys. Only Cephas is below double digits, and he's at 9.8. Franklin's at 12.5. I think you want to play one of these guys. Playing 2 is a little cost prohibitive, but 1 I'm trying to get to. And I don't really have a strong preference. If I were to rank them, Franklin, Cephas, and Clark, but that's the order they're priced. I think you play whoever fits between these 3 in your lineups. At running back, Traylon Smith is banged up. He hasn't played in 2 games. We'll see if he returns. Not the most optimism there, but he did shut his walking boot, so maybe he does suit up. I don't know. It's not an efficient rushing attack regardless, though. And when Smith is back, you have a committee between him and Brady. So that automatically would kind of move these guys down the list. But Brady by himself is tournament viable. He has touch counts of 21 and 17 in back-to-back games. Not efficient with them, but we're just looking for contrarian spots. 5,900 is not expensive, and there's not great running backs on the slate. There's a couple I'm interested in a little later that we'll talk about, but for tournaments and pivots, Brady provides that. For Middle Tennessee, coming off that huge upset over Miami, this matchup certainly doesn't scare you. UTSA allowing 9.2 yards per pass attempt, so Cunningham theoretically can keep it rolling here. He's averaging 250 yards per game. He has 57 cumulative rushing yards. He's fine. And I think a lot of people are knocking him prematurely for that game against James Madison. They lost DJ England Chisholm right away in the game. He only played 8 snaps. Jalen Lane didn't play in the game. He finally has a full complement of receivers, and that showed against Miami in particular. They were explosive. They were throwing the ball downfield. Now we can fully evaluate them. So Cunningham at 6,600, I would rather play Harris in a vacuum, but I think you can play them both. Cunningham has some upside, stackability for sure. And the number 1 player I'm looking for is Gathings. He had an 80% route share. The rest of them were a little lower. You're looking at the 60% range for DJ England, Chisholm, Jalen Lane, and Yusuf Ali. Between them, it's really hard to prioritize. I think Gathings is just the number 1 play of the group because of price. But once you get a little lower, I think you can differentiate a little bit. But just know it is a rotation. Like, even if you do play one of Ali, Lane, or England Chisholm, you have to worry about Elijah Metcalf and Tony playing a little bit too. Those guys were both north of 30% of the routes. But with that out of the way last week, Gathings, I actually was higher than I thought. He was at 93% of the routes. Then you had Yusuf Ali, 61%, Jalen Lane, 82%. That's fantastic. And then DJ Anglin Chisel at 68%. Then the aforementioned Tony and Metcalf, 36% apiece. So ranking them, it's Gathings 1, Lane 2, and then I'm fine with either Anglin Chisholm or Ali as tournament plays. San Diego State takes on, we forgot the backfield. Not to jump ahead. Frank Peasant would not be happy. All right, the backfield. It has condensed a little bit here. It's varied depending on game script. You can see Frank Peasant, he went from 9 carries in week 1. That was when they got thrashed by James Madison to 22, then down to 13, back up to 20, playing in positive game script. It's been relatively efficient, and his pass game role is not the best. He will rotate a little bit with our various Sparrow there, but it's pseudo bell cow backfield. So I think the pass game's a little more efficient to target here, but a contrarian Frank Peasant could make some sense as well. All right, now we can jump to the next game. San Diego State takes on Boise State. 6-point spread, 39 total. That total should scream stay away for the most part from this game. Boise State undergoing a lot of turmoil, fired their OC, quarterback announced he's going to enter the transfer portal. The line moved positively in Boise's favor when that occurred, so it tells you a lot about the talent they were dealing with. But let's start with San Diego State. It's a team you should mostly be avoiding. Braxton Burmeister's averaging 57 pass yards per game. He is mobile, but he just doesn't give you enough through the air to really warrant consideration here. I would rather play running back in the flex. At running back itself, you have the return potentially of Cam Davis. We'll have to watch his status. Jalen Armstead's back. Jordan Byrd handled 60 carries in the last game, which surprised me, but he doesn't have a target on the year, and I'm worried this just devolves back to 4 guys. He's the Stone Min, so you could probably do worse than playing Jordan Byrd, but I still have reservations. Maybe I'll end up with a little bit of him. I'm not sure, but he's not great. The receiving room is a disaster. Jesse Matthews and Tyrell Shavers are the top 2. Neither of them averages more than 17 yards per game or 4.8 targets. Mark Redmond's the full-time tight end. I would rather punt with Middle Tennessee State guys or Tulane guys. Boise, Taylon Green's now the starter, which is positive for DFS because he can move. Hank Bachmeier was a pocket statue. We saw one appearance from Taylon Green this year. He rushed for 100 yards. He threw for 154. It was pretty good. So there's optimism here, but the issue is Boise still only implied for 22.5 points. So do you really want to prioritize Taylon Green when there's Frank Harris and some of these other guys right above 6K? Personally, I think there's a lot of opportunity costs, so I'm not going to. And then it's like, what does the new OC do with this backfield? Because Ashton Genty has been more efficient than Helani throughout the year, but Tim Plow was insistent on slamming Helani into the back of his O-line 20 times a game for 3.7 yards per carry. Yes, that's his average. I don't know. Maybe they make the switch. I have no idea what they're going to do, what Cutter's going to do, their new OC. They should have made the switch a while ago, but they haven't. The redeeming quality for Helani outside of volume, he's averaging 21.5 touches per game. As he's been a pretty good receiver. Got to give him credit there. But I'll be looking to avoid Helani, at least in smaller fields and cash games. But in tournaments, he's still viable. Same with Genty. He's just better than Helani, even though the previous OC didn't realize. Top 3 receivers, it's Stephen Cobbs, Latrell Caples. Then there's a gap. Billy Bowens is basically splitting time 50-50 with Davis Cutter, and it's not really reflected in targets. Bowens still at a 5-3 target advantage over Cutter, but it is a 1-for-1, 50% timeshare between them. You're playing Caples or Cobbs if you're playing one of them, but these guys are egregiously expensive. Just play DeCorian Clark if you're even considering these guys. Like, there's no point. And then if you're considering Bowens, I would probably just play Tyneil Hopper. Both Riley Smith and Kurt Rafdal have gotten hurt at the tight end position, really condensing things down here for Tyneil Hopper, who should have a larger role. But again, I don't just question how good he is. Excellent game here. Washington takes on UCLA, 65.5 total, right up there with UTSA and Middle Tennessee. Among the games we really want to hammer here. 3-point spread in favor of Washington. Both teams play at the speed of light. Washington's pass heavy. Kalen DeBoer came over from Fresno State, brought that scheme. UCLA has actually been pretty pass heavy too. 48.5% pass rates, higher than I expected this year. And we'll talk a little bit about why. But starting with Washington, Penix is having a career resurgence. He's playing better than he ever did at Indiana. 347 yards per game, 26 yards on the ground, which is noteworthy just because he's not taking sacks. That's awesome for Penix. The negative plays are gone. You can play him confidently, and he's easy to stack. You can use Jalen McMillan or Rome Odunze. Odunze is egregiously priced after he missed week 2. He's had at least 7 targets in every game, averaging 8.7 per game, averaging 97.7 yards per game. He's probably among the best price-adjusted plays on the slate. I don't want to say he's the stone best, but he's right there. McMillan's solid too, and I don't think people are going to play McMillan as much. Expect some configuration of like Rome Odunze and then the expensive UTSA guys, potentially allowing McMillan to come in under-owned. He's also averaging 8 targets per game, 91.8 yards. Jalen Polk is the wide receiver 3. Even if Giles Jackson out-targeted him 6-2 last week, the routes were heavily in favor of Jalen Polk. He was just on the field way more, and I would expect this to normalize, especially because Polk has been way more efficient. You look at yardage, Polk 256, Giles Jackson 175. Tight end is a complete rotation between Culp and Westover. Once you get below this, I think we're in pure dart throw territory. I'm going to be focusing attention on McMillan, Odunze, and Polk. The run game, we may see the return of Cameron Davis. We are not sure. That would probably render this a timeshare between Wayne Talapapa, the Virginia transfer, and Davis, making them both pretty hard to target. And my main concern with Talapapa, even with Davis out, is they immediately inserted some combination of Richard Newton and Will Nixon into the backfield as well. They really did not give him the full workload, which I think is a problem moving forward. He just had 13 touches with Cameron Davis out of the lineup. I don't think he has a ceiling here for like 20, so it's probably an avoid at that price, but it's tough to say. Maybe they change. I would be a little surprised if they do. Dorian Thompson-Robinson certainly benefits from that play rate, but he's an interesting case here. 170 yards per game. That rushing output is down a little bit from last year where he averaged 50 yards per game on the ground. They played 3 cupcakes in South Alabama, so this probably rises at some point. DTR is awesome as a passer too. He just doesn't have the most volume. You're going to see around like 230 yards per game. That's right where he was last year. Right now he's at 222.5. I would expect this to rise with more competitive games. So DTR is in play. I would rather play Penix 1-for-1, but can't go wrong with DTR. The mobility is there. The backfield, Charbonnet had 26 touches in week 1, 5 targets in the pass game, and then he got injured. Didn't play in week 2. He's been eased back into action the last 2 weeks. He's still averaging 97.3 rushing yards per game, and he's averaging 29 receiving yards per game. Charbonnet is so efficient, and we've seen him get the bell cow workload in competitive games, semi-competitive games. If this game remains close, Charbonnet has some of the biggest upside on the entire slate, and there's a very real chance you never see him at this price again because of the talent. Again, this is me assuming a few things, but all this to say, I am a fan of Charbonnet. I like Keegan Jones as well, but I don't believe he sees 12 touches per game the rest of the way if we have a fully healthy Charbonnet. Again, this comes down to 2 things. Do they trust him fully to handle the workload? I think so because they've shown it. And is he fully healthy? That part I can't tell you. Going to the receivers, we saw the return of Cam Brown. That immediately knocked the snaps and routes for Casimir Allen, Titus Mikao, Ati Malala. Now, Bobo kind of stayed in his role. So among the pass catchers, I think you're primarily looking at Bobo and Cam Brown in 2 wide sets. Neither of them are heavily targeted, and Bobo's really expensive. Like 1-for-1, you're just playing the UTSA guys. You're just playing Nathaniel Dell. But Cam Brown is viable at 4,400. Just 1 target last week. Played the second most snaps and routes among receivers. That 1 target kept his price down. He is viable here. The wide receiver 3 is going to be a nasty rotation between Casimir Allen, TMA. You're going to see Josiah Norwood, Logan Loya mix in occasionally. Even, like Matt Sykes comes in occasionally. Hudson Habermel's the tight end. He's going to split time with Michael Ezeki. It's like a 60-40 split, 70-30 split, somewhere in that range. But I'm probably just going to go down and play Cam Brown if I'm playing a cheap UCLA pass catcher. Closing things out, really fun game at night. New Mexico, UNLV. Total's not great here at 43, but UNLV's favored by enough where they're viable. 14-point spread. Miles Kendricks, the quarterback for New Mexico, not great. He's averaging 107.5 yards per game, and he has just 15 rush yards. It's because he's taking so many sacks. He's actually pretty mobile. And he has 19 design rush attempts this year, but 14 sacks essentially mitigates that entirely. The backfield's a timeshare between Nathaniel Jones, Sherrod White, Christian Washington. They also play Luke Wysong there, which is tricky because he's receiver. And previously, they hadn't caught on to that, playing this sort of Deebo Samuel role, but now they have, so he's 6,100. He still averages 5 targets per game. He's giving you double-digit carries in every game. He's semi-viable. That's 9.3 touches. I still would rather find the extra salary for DeClorian Clark, but Wysong tournament play maybe. Jordan Porter's the wide receiver 2, and I'm not playing anyone else besides that. No one has more than 5 targets. Backfield, again, nasty committee. Nathaniel Jones, if anyone, but the answer for me is I'll pass. UNLV's fun. They're playing explosive football. Doug Brumfield is having a career resurgence. He has 123 rush yards, which is solid for him. It's giving you like 30, 40 rush yards per game. And he's averaging 247.3 through the air. He has explosive pass catchers. Ricky White and Kyle Williams. Kyle Williams, the incumbent last year, Ricky White, the Michigan State transfer. Both of them got banged up in their last game. You're going to have to watch them pregame and see what they do. White was at the end of the game. Williams was about the midpoint, and he didn't come back in. So this is key. I wouldn't expect reporting on this, but if they both play, Brumfield would enter my player pool, even though he's a little expensive. You know, like 1-for-1, I'd prefer Frank Harris, but still am going to play a little Brumfield if his pass catchers are there. Ricky White's been awesome. He's averaging 79.3 yards per game. Williams has been good too. He's at 58.8. If they both play, I prefer White 1-for-1, but can't knock Williams either. And then if one or two of them miss, you'll see increased opportunities for Jeff Weimer. He's already averaging 5.3 targets per game, 44.8 yards. He's cheap enough to look at. Let's assume one of them misses. Your wide receiver 3 is going to be Nick Williams. If they both miss, Nick Williams should be bumped to the 2, Weimer the 1, and that should that should put Seneca McKee into the lineup, I would guess, as well. So then if they're both out, I would assume it's Jeff Weimer, Nick Williams, and Seneca McKee as the 3 wide receivers, but don't be surprised if there's some rotation in there. And in that instance, you're probably interested in Shelton Zion, their tight end, who's played a lot of routes, but only 8 targets on the year, 63 yards. In that range, I would rather just find the salary for Weimer, but I hope that was a comprehensive breakdown of the UNLV receivers. Last guy to mention here is Aiden Robbins. This dude is a monster. Last 2 games, he has touch counts of 31 and 29. He has 29 and 27 carries. He's averaging over 100 yards per game. He's the 4th most targeted receiver on the team. This dude's role is monstrous. They're 14-point favorites. New Mexico's allowing 4.4 yards per rush attempt. Certainly not anything noteworthy. Robbins is a great play. He's right up there with like Charbonnet. Those are my 2 favorite running back plays on the board. And then we already talked about some of the contrarian guys, but Robbins is number 1 for me at running back. This dude is awesome. The workload is unbelievable right now. He's a lock and load guy here. And that's a great way to end the conversation about the slate. If you guys have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments. I'll get back to you on those. And if you'd like to, you can reach out to me on Twitter, always available at Matt_Gajeski. Otherwise, thank you to Prize Picks again. And thank you guys for watching. We'll be back for more tomorrow, talking the main slate. Until then, we will see you guys later.